Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, the 9/11 deep dive with Adam Fitzgerald. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. We dive deep into a lot of this stuff through a lot of these episodes, but this is one of my favorite ones to record, so I really think you'll like it. I really think you'll get into the information that we're spreading on this one. If you're like me, you like BBC, and there's nothing like a BBC in your mouth. So if you want the lingering flavor of a BBC in your mouth, go to foxandsons.com. Foxandsons.com is where you will get a very nice smoked chocolate BBC in your mouth. Go to foxandsons.com for your big, bold coffee. And if you sign up for an order of more than $20, you'll get 15% off if you use 0 as your code. So go to foxandsons.com for a great big, bold coffee. That's your BBC. Put it in your mouth. Maybe let it linger there for a little bit. Let them know that you've come around because of year 0, and use the code 0 when you make any order over $20 for 15% off at foxandsons.com. That's Fox, the letter N, sons.com for your big, bold coffee, baby. RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a shitty libertarian. He's a shitty person. He's a shitty business owner. And he's a shitty graphic designer, which is why he needs your charity at RyanBunting.com. Go to RyanBunting.com and give him all the charity you can give him, because Ryan Bunting is a starving artist. He's a shitty artist, but he's a starving artist. So feed that fucker at RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. LibertarianInstitute.org. That's where you'll find me, Patrick McFarlane, Kyle Anzalone, Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Dave DeCamp, Will Porter, Kim Robinson. All of us motherfuckers are over at the LibertarianInstitute.org. Every once in a while, you might run into a Jim Bovard or a Ron Paul. But go to LibertarianInstitute.org and enjoy all of the content that we are creating for you over at the LibertarianInstitute.org. It's for you, by us. Because you couldn't do it right. No, I'm just kidding. Go to libertarianinstitute.org and check out all the work we're doing, because we're working really hard over there. So, libertarianinstitute.org. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. Okay, we're back. Once again, Adam Fitzgerald. What's going on, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Doing Tommy? Well. Yeah, we got all our complaining out of the way beforehand.
We sure did. I feel better. I feel spiritually and morally better.
Yeah, well.
A cleansing, if you will.
Yes.
Cleansing.
So we're going to keep going down this 9/11 deep dive road. We're going to talk Saudi Arabia and the 28 pages today.
Yes, sir.
So there's always a lot of speculation about Saudi Arabia. I don't know how much of it is provable and all the information that's out there, but I know there was situation a few years back when Trump was still president. There were lawsuits that were filed, and the DOJ put a stop to the lawsuits there for a while. So do you know whatever came of that?
Yeah. So what happened was immediately after that, the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, basically were pressuring the Obama administration not to release a portion of the joint inquiry into intelligence community activities into the September 11th attacks. And this involved members of the Democrats and Republicans Joint Senate Select Committee. And the part of that report is called, infamously called the 28 pages. And it actually refers to, the section is called, it's actually in parts. So this is part 4. And the entitlement is called Finding, Discussion, and Narrative Regarding Certain Sensitive National Security Matters. And it summarizes the findings about possible Saudi financing regarding two or three 9/11 hijackers. And that's Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Hani Hanjour. And so the Saudi operatives some of them were redacted in a lot of these reports that even predated the 28 pages. For example, the memorandum for the records of certain individuals like Fahad al-Thumari, who's an imam at the King Fahd Mosque in Los Angeles, where Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi went to. Another Saudi operative, Omar al-Bayoumi, who is an employee of a Saudi government agency at the Saudi Arabian Air Presidency. Osama Basnan, who is a hardline Wahhabi militant who has links to Omar al-Bayoumi, and another individual named Muwassid al-Jar, no relation to Ziad al-Jar, the pilot hijacker of Flight 93, alleged. And Muwassid al-Jar, whose name was just recently redacted from an FBI page during the investigation into Saudi Arabia by the FBI, showed that he worked inside the United States up until 2005, before he left for Saudi Arabia. And he worked in Washington, D.C., head of the Saudi Arabian Religious Affairs Committee, and he was actually, he served as a liaison or a monitor to Fahd al-Thumari, Omar al-Bayoumi, and Osama Basnan. And so what we have in these 28 pages that we know of is public. And the person who ran the website, he now runs Stalk Realities, Brian McGlinchey, brought light to this topic, whereas, the media and generally the federal government are not going to basically rush to the attention of the public itself. But what we have in this 28 pages shows that there was indeed a number of individuals inside the United States, Saudi government operatives, who were acting as financial and logistic liaisons to 2 or 3 of the 9/11 hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdhar, Nawaf al-Hazmi, and Hani Hanjour. And so this basically showed that there was a foreign entity inside the United States providing financial support for them to get around, for them to basically rent an apartment, to open up a bank account, and 2, providing logistical support, acting as directionary aids or providing transportations in the way of cab drivers that would drive them around town, because they didn't speak English and they didn't know their way around. So you had these people providing all these type of assistance to them. And so the U.S. intelligence community believed that the members of the Saudi government were indeed helping individuals relating to Al-Qaeda in California.
And I mean, man.
That's a lot on the plate.
It is, man. There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here when it comes to Saudi, because part of it is the relationship of the United States with the Saudis, and then you look at the Saudi relationship with Al-Qaeda, and the size of the royal family. I know in 2017 there was a royal coup in Saudi Arabia, and that's when bin Salman, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Mohammed bin Salman,
Bin
Crown
Salman.
Prince.
That's when he took power. And it's just like, how do you separate out of all of these hundreds of people that are involved here, who's involved in what they're, what they got their hands in, what they're doing behind the scenes, undercover. It's just so weird. It's the way that the Saudi government is set up is so foreign, like beyond any other government that I've ever looked at.
Yes, well, actually, it's the only monarchy in the world where it's set up now. We don't know for sure. It's approximate that there are 5,000 to 7,000 people within the royal family. And what you have is different clans, and they're called the Sudari Seven. And these are the 7 sons related to the founder of Saudi Arabia, Ibn Saud. And so you have the Salmans, you have the Fads, the Khalids. So you have all these sons that originate, the first original 7 sons of Saudi Arabia, who now have their own sons who, through wives, and, they have their own families' names, different clans, and all different factions. And whoever has the most financial and situational power in the family usually wins over, like the religious, it's called the Ulema Committee, the religious committee. That's the Wahhabi committee. Separate from, say, the Committee of Saudi Arabian Affairs or the Ministry Committee. Remember that Saudi Arabia was founded upon the principles of 2 people, Ibn Saud and Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Wahhab. Wahhab is the founder of Wahhabism. Saud is the military founder of Saudi Arabia. And when he captured the cities of Najd and Hejaz from the Hashemites, he unified the country in itself. And it used to be called the Emirate of Dadia. But after capturing these cities, he called the nation state Saudi Arabia. And so the first Arabian country was born. And with that, the original tenets of Ibn Saud and Al-Wahhab still exist even to this day. So you do have a religious and a military committee that runs the country itself. And so you could see where you have this ideology that is present in the country, even though every 4 years with a new US president or a continuation of the previous administration, you'll always hear especially through the legacy media, that they're reforming and that they're not this backwards, crazy jihadist terrorist nation that they're trying to make amends. Now, bin Salman is pretty ingenious in that idea because he actually did cater to the Obama and the Biden administrations, stating that he would try and reform the country. And that's when you talked about the coup that happened in 2017, 2016, 17.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And he took over the family from bin Nayef, who was the legitimate heir to the throne. That's one of the Sudari 7 sons, the Nayef family. So basically what happened was bin Salman, he took all the threats or the naysayers to the bin Salman line, suggesting that what he was doing was illegal. And he got the religious police, and of course the General Intelligence Directorate, the GID, got involved and arrested even crown princesses within the family line. And he got rid of all the detractors and arrested a lot of them. One of the most richest Saudi Arabians in the whole world. And now that I want to say his name, I can't remember his name, but he actually owns a lot of U.S. Government entities here in the United States as well. He was arrested too, and he was blackmailed, and he had to give up some of his money, but he's still a billionaire many times over. But when 60 Minutes actually interviewed him, he said, "Oh, nothing was wrong." He goes, "They just wanted to talk to me. Nobody's going to call out this regime because they're so corrupt, the bin Salmans." Now, remember, his father is still alive, King Salman, quote unquote alive, but he has a stroke and he's not really in power. But because he's alive, he's still the king. But the one running really the country is the crown prince, and that's Mohammed bin Salman. And he is the most ruthless, most corrupt crown prince I think the country's ever had. And yes, he scaled back the religious tenets in the country. He allowed women to go to movie theaters now. The movie theaters are now open. Women can drive, but dissidents will not be allowed. Any type of voice criticisms of the kingdom are immediately dealt with, and they're dealt with swiftly. Now, years ago, this would be an in-house thing, but with bin Salman, he now goes after the dissidents in other countries. And the greatest, most pronounced case is the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, which outraged much of the United States, Turkey, because it happened in Turkey, and other countries as well. But nobody dare goes against the kingdom because, hey, remember, we allow the United States to regulate the oil, but we still have the oil, and we could go to other countries and give it to them cheaper, like Russia or Great Britain. So yeah, they wield a great amount of power for a country that is, that has no familiarity with any country in the world outside of the Gulf. And that's the reason why nobody really knows much about this very strange family, the Saudi Sudari Seven, or, how the country is operated, because outsiders are not permitted to mingle with the Saudi kingdom itself and the princes along within this family. And so, and also too, we share nothing in common with Saudi Arabia at all when it comes to politics or religion. At least with Israel, we have a lot of commonality regarding that, not religiously, but politically. And that comes from, obviously, the evangelical Christians in the United States. But when you talk about the Gulf lobby, many people know about, they have a lobby. And that's because, they keep it secret because, if you find out about the lobby and you see what these people are about, you're like, how the hell are we friends with these ghouls?
Yeah, right.
Why are we friends with these people? The Israelis try to keep at a minimum their human crimes. I mean, just with the Palestinians, they can't hide that fact. But the Saudi Arabians, I mean, God's sakes, Yemen is the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world.
Right.
And yet, all you hear about is Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right. Or the
alleged
crimes in China with the Uyghurs that, seemingly doesn't exist. But you'll barely hear anything about Yemen. And there's 644,000 dead.
Yeah.
It's just unreal. And 3 million displaced, unreal numbers. No, not to mention the people. That shows you the power of the Saudi lobby.
Yeah. So when you're looking at the time frame of 9/11 and when this happened, which of the 7 families do you think was involved in this? Or do you know like some of the names that were involved?
Well, at the time, the king was King Fahd. And at the time also in 2001, we still had a religious committee and a lot of sympathizers in the kingdom. And we're talking about not just the kingdom, but with the family line.
Right.
We had a lot of sympathizers with the bin Laden family. Now, remember, the bin Laden family is still a powerful company magnate in the country, even today, 2022. So they are not part, incidentally enough, they're not part of the Saudi kingdom, the family itself, but they are the most powerful corporation and the most powerful entity that is not involved with the kingdom itself in the family line. And that goes all the way back to the 1920s with Mohammed ibn Awad bin Laden, who is the founder of the bin Laden Saudi group. And it's funny because when you mention the Saudi bin Laden group, you barely hear about all the other brothers that, bin Laden had, Osama bin Laden had.
Right.
Who, basically he was considered a black sheep of the family. So I couldn't tell you a specific individual who was involved with like orchestrating or planning with Al Qaeda to attack the United States. But what I can say is that you had a lot of sympathizers within the kingdom and outside of the family line that were, giving money to Al Qaeda even before 9/11 even happened. I mean, even in Afghanistan when the Soviets invaded, and who knows what else. But we do know that it started even before the Soviets invaded Kabul in 1979, when the Saudi royal family started pumping in millions of dollars through the oil boom in the 70s, building madrasas all throughout the United States, Southeast Asia, and in Europa too. And that was because, they were reaping the rewards of the 70s. And throughout the 70s and the 80s, early 80s, Saudi Arabia was rife with Wahhabi fanatics that were willing to spread their ideology worldwide as far as the eye could see. And all they needed was money. Well, they got plenty of that. And sure enough, you had enough of these sympathizers that used the pretext of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan to basically spend millions, hundreds of millions, no exaggeration, hundreds of millions of dollars into the conflict. And when they were doing this, whether they knew it or not, indirectly or directly, they were helping to build the foundations for some of the most notorious terrorist groups throughout the 90s and early 2000s, like Al Qaeda, like Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, like Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia. And just alone, those three groups would create some of the worst terrorist attacks in the nation's history. Now, of course, everybody knows the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and, of course, the 9/11 attacks. But what people tend to forget, the second biggest terrorist attack in the world, let me test you. Do you know who it is? Do you know when that was?
I don't remember what year it was, but I want to say it was in England, wasn't it? It was a subway bombing in England.
Good, close, but no cigar. It was
okay.
actually the 2002 Bali bombings attacks.
Oh, okay.
Perpetrated by Jemaah Islamiyah. I believe it was, and forgive me for not specifically knowing the number. I think it's over 100 to 200 people that were killed in two bombings, and those bombs were huge. One was at Patty's Bar, and the other one was at a nightclub, and I think it's called Dolly's. I think. Forgive me, I'm getting older, so I'm forgetting names. So that's what's great. Well, I could use that excuse.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, those two bombs killed a ton of people, and they were huge bombs, and the money came from none other than Bin Laden and people in Saudi Arabia. And it just goes to show you how far and wide and reaching these sympathizers are.
I just remember there was that subway bombing in England.
Yes.
And then I remember there was a soccer stadium. I don't know where that was, but I remember there was a soccer stadium that was bombed at some point. And I remember hearing about these things. They were all going on around the same time.
Yeah, the Madrid, July 7th, it's called 7/7.
Was that in Madrid?
Bombing. Yeah, Madrid. Al Qaeda affiliates were involved with that. And it was one person, Yarkis. I wish I remembered his first name, Yarkis or Farkas or something like that. He's an Al Qaeda affiliate who has connections in Eastern Europe and in Spain and Germany. He's an Al Qaeda affiliate and basically was part of those attacks. A lot of the bombers that were involved with that had transferred from Afghanistan, from camps that were built in the 90s with the help of like the CIA and the Pakistan ISI and Saudi Arabian money.
Right.
So yeah, all that comes back. It's like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And then all of a sudden that enemy now comes back to haunt you, in terms of terrorism. And what really gets me, Tommy, is that knowing that the CIA's Operation Cyclone and the Pakistan ISI, these intelligence services, I can't help but to think that, hey, we know who we're funding here in 79, 1980, 81. And maybe one day this will come back and haunt us. But, I can't say for sure. I mean, that's speculation. But, it just grinds my gears to think that a lot of these founding members of these groups I mentioned came from that war in which the money and training came from, the United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And guess what? We're seeing a revisitation of sorts in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And, I just saw a story too, not to get off track, but I saw a story too in Italy. They just arrested an Azov battalion unit in Italy. And, they would talk about doing terrorist attacks in Italy. I'm like, here we go. Here's it. This is what happens when you dump billions. And with this time, it's billions of dollars in Ukraine, not millions, billions, right? And all these right-wing nationalist groups. And that's what the CIA loves to deal with. These far extremists of the right, whether it's orthodox or nationalist, it doesn't matter, because they'll go and do the dirty work that the CIA won't do. But the CIA certainly pushes these groups and individuals in that direction, knowing full well what they're going to do later on. So it boggles my mind that the CIA didn't know that by, giving these Mujahideen fighters, Arabs, Mujahideen fighters, all this money and all this military training, that it wasn't going to come back and hurt them.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that they would go through with that and without even considering there would be any repercussions whatsoever. But I mean, part of that's arrogance, They're just like, yeah, we got this under control. We can deal with these people, We've been arming them. We've been taking care of them during this invasion of Russia into Afghanistan. They're on our side, and it's like, no, they're on their side, man.
Yeah,
exactly. They're playing utilitarian right now. They're going to take your arms and they're going to use your arms against you whenever it suits them.
Sure. And look, what's the springboard for all this? It's U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
I mean, it just invites danger. We're subjugating these Arab countries like Iraq in 1990 with the oil for food program, which killed 500,000 people. I mean, we all know about that clip with Madeleine Albright. That was the price worth it? And she says, yeah. I mean, these are sociopaths, these people. Well, anyway, I mean, throughout the late 80s, early 90s, our own foreign policy, and of course, with the one-sided policy we have with Israel, certainly didn't help, and it invited, these Wahhabi fanatics to basically say, yeah, all right, we'll see what you got, and basically, they showed you what they got, and showed you what they're willing to do, and not to mention, of course, the intelligence agencies that knew full well, and this is speculation too, but I can make a great argument for it that. They could have stopped the 93 bombing. They could have stopped the East Africa bombings of 98. They could have stopped 9/11 if they just shared information, if they just monitored these people off the bat, arrested some of these people, worked with the FBI hand in hand, worked with the NSA hand in hand, shared all information and not just some information. All this could have been stopped, and rather easily. I mean, I'm not saying this. I'll take the words of Thomas Drake, the former senior executive of the NSA.
Right.
The NSA, had so much metadata before 9/11. He basically says that if it was shared, could have stopped 9/11 altogether and arrested all 19 that were involved. I mean, what does that tell you? And that's just the NSA.
Right. Yeah.
And I've made video after video about the CIA and what they didn't share with the FBI. And, the DIA, Able Danger Program, the FBI, domestic agency, and it all boils down to basically, did they do this on purpose or not? And that's the argument to make. Like, maybe they wanted this to happen to extrapolate on the Patriot Act, to go to war with Iraq and Afghanistan. All this is, reasonable speculation. It's not fringe material. And, I happen to believe that's the reason why. But very few people would have to be in the know. All you have to do is just get the top levels of the intelligence services, basically just, allow these people to do what they want and then take advantage of the action. As Saul Alinsky would say, the action is in the reaction.
Right.
So look at how the United States reacted.
Well, and it's like me, I don't even take a side as to whether they did it or not. The part that gets me is I can look at it and go, are they capable of doing it? Yeah, obviously. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I look at the history I know with the Gulf of Tonkin, with, like how they lied into World War I with babies on bayonets, lying into the first Iraq war, talking about babies in incubators.
Yeah.
Like, I look at these things and I'm go, okay, are they capable of lying us into Afghanistan? Are they capable of the price is worth it with American lives? And I'm like, yeah, they are. I'm sorry. You look at Waco, Ruby Ridge.
Oh yeah.
They'll just they'll dispose of whoever's in their way. They don't care if you're American or if you're Afghani.
Oh, sure.
You know,
The big counter argument to all this I hear sometimes from my position is that why would the United States do this? Well, you think they're willing to kill 3,000 their own lives? I say, oh, absolutely. They've done far worse.
Yeah.
And you brought another great point that you raised is another great example, Waco. I mean, look what happened there.
Yeah.
They could have arrested Kosher.
Well, how many Americans died in World War I because they lied us into that war?
Sure.
You know,
right.
Yeah, right. Those were just sacrificial lambs, like
right.
whatever, you know.
Absolutely.
And it was for their benefit. However, they saw that benefit moving forward, right? And so when you start looking at these things, you're like, okay, is Saudi Arabia complicit? Most likely. Sure. Is, you know, bin Laden complicit? Most definitely. Sure. Is Israel complicit? It's possible.
Sure. Yeah.
Is the United States complicit? It's possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you can say that's possible, then you're like, okay, there's a problem with the government, right? Like there's an issue going on here.
Right.
Our allies and our own government are able to do this by any standard, by any metric. And it's like, okay, there's an issue.
Sure. And look, you know, all you have to do is say who benefited from the 9/11 attacks, right? So you have, I could count 3 countries that benefited: the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Now, let's start with the former. Israel and Saudi Arabia benefited in the fact that the United States military invaded the countries that were preconceived enemies to both of those countries, Iraq and Afghanistan. And not only that, later on, they extended it to Syria and Libya. Okay. These are all, most of these countries are Shia countries. And so from the Saudi perspective, they're a Sunni Wahhabi country. They see the Shias as heretics. And so they would rather get those countries out of the way, eliminated, destroyed, so Saudi Arabia could become the premier elite Arab country in the entire Middle East. For Israel, it doesn't matter whether it's Sunni or Shia. At least we get rid of these Arabs and Muslims and that they become the predominant power in the Middle East by way of the United States. The United States benefits in the fact that, you know, the military industrial complex, the intelligence agencies all benefit from having a blank check, which is what happened after the 9/11 attacks. The NSA, CIA expanded. We had the invention of the Transportation Security Administration, the Department of Homeland Security, the Patriot Act, the North Defense Act of 2002, 2003, the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Libya, the invasion of Syria, continuous state of war using the pretext of the war on terrorism. And so trillions of dollars, $3 trillion just alone for Afghanistan. That was 20 years. What was gained? Nothing, because we left the country and nothing was gained. Now the Taliban is back running the country. So what was gained there and how many lives were lost? Iraq, 2 civil wars, created a group, created the vacuum for the Islamic State in the Levant, basically creating a group within a section of all the Baathists that were let go of their positions through Iraqi Provisional Order number 1 and 2, led by none other than Bush fanatic L. Paul Bremer, who basically destroyed the country's military and police, which was needed in a time of war. But when they destroyed these entities and all the government entities related to the Baathists, they basically created a vacuum of extremists. And all those Baathists helped to create the Islamic State in Levant. And read Ali Soufan's Black Banners book, great book that talks about this. But yeah, I mean, I could go on. And, you know, guess who made hand over fist? You know, Donald Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Halliburton, Raytheon, Boeing, LG3 Technology, you name it. All these groups that basically built the bombs and the bullets and the missiles and the tanks and the jeeps that were needed to fight this perpetual war on terrorism that was helped to perpetuate by none other than the United States through the funding and the training of the 1979 ghouls that were in Afghanistan, and we're fighting these enemies now because they don't serve a purpose anymore.
How did I'm sorry. How did the U.S. convince Israel and Saudi Arabia to go along with overthrowing Hussein, knowing that the Shia were going to be taking over Iraq?
I think this is basically an Israeli proposition that saw Hussein as a danger to Israel itself. Now, Hussein is no friend to Benjamin Netanyahu. He was no friend to Yitzhak Rabin and Ehud Barak, the prime ministers of Israel. And basically, he was part of the Arab Committee in the early 90s. Same thing with Bashar al-Assad.
So you don't think Israel would have been afraid that a Shia regime in Iraq would have strengthened Iran, and so that would have surrounded them?
What they wanted to do was break the chain of the links between Iran and Lebanon. And what they feared was Hezbollah. Okay. Hezbollah basically is the only entity on earth that defeated the Israeli military in 2006. It's the only entity on earth that did it. Okay. Ever since then, the war against Hezbollah really extrapolated on that. But before that, Iran saw the dangers of the Ba'athists linking up with the group Hezbollah in Lebanon. What they wanted to do is basically, this is part of the Oded Yunan plan, which is an outline by Yitzhak, I forgot his name. I'm forgetting his full name, who created a foreign policy outline, which shows that Israel needed to begin dialogues with certain countries that would allow them to basically usurp these Arab governments that would be considered a danger to Israel, because what they feared was Israel was slowly being encircled by Arab leaders that were not friendly to Israel. And so the Oded Yunan plan basically created an outline where Israel would use the United States to basically usurp these non-friendly, non-Western-backed Arab leaders and implement Western-backed leaders in the process. And so what they did was when Afghanistan was taken over, Hamid Karzai took over the country for a little while. With Iraq, they had to get rid of Hussein and implement Morsi, who was involved with unfortunately was involved with a civil war that was going to happen between the Sunni and the Shia that you're relating to. But what they wanted to do, incidentally enough, what they wanted to do was basically break the chain between Iran and Lebanon, and what's between Iran and Lebanon, Syria and Iraq. Right. So in order for that Hezbollah chain into Iran to be linked, we have to break the link and to destroy these countries in the process. Remember, if it was just about 9/11, it was just about destroying terrorism, wouldn't we be invading Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates? Right. Were they home to these countries, these evil Wahhabi ghouls? No. We went into Iraq, we went to Afghanistan, we went to Libya and Syria. Incidentally enough, just to pique your interest here, do you know who the first person to give a international warrant of arrest for bin Laden?
Wasn't that Bush Senior?
It was Muammar Gaddafi.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Libya. Muammar Gaddafi, because it was a bombing that happened that killed, I think, 2 or 3 Libyans in the process. Was it the 93 attacks with the East Africa bombings? But yeah, Muammar Gaddafi is the first person on earth to issue an international arrest warrant for bin Laden. And even after the 98 attacks, the United States didn't issue an arrest warrant for him. Instead, we implement George Tenet, the DCI in 99 and say 97 and say, hey, create an outline where we can, attack bin Laden. What does he do? Well, he says, we're at war. We're at war with Al Qaeda. Well, I mean, what does that even mean? We're at war with an ideology, with a terrorist group that, doesn't have a standing like army. Yeah, they're a military threat for sure, international threat. Sure, they got money behind it. Sure, but they're not like a country. They're not like a threat, but they're anomalous. So they're all over the place. And that was used to their advantage. The State Department, the CIA, they saw the advantage of what bin Laden was doing, unlike Abu Nidal, who is the first Arab terrorist in the United States. I mean, against the United States and the Abu Nidal organization. But they were more situated. They couldn't create like this international threat like Al Qaeda did. So once Nidal was no good and he was assassinated by Hussein of all people in Iraq. So what happens? Well, bin Laden takes over. And what is he? Oh, now he's even a bigger threat because he could reach you wherever he can, unlike Abu Nidal. So it's funny that we talk about the dangers of why the Saudis and Israelis wanted to destroy Iraq and the
Well, I
CS.
heard that Scott makes an argument that the Saudis were pissed, and that's why That's why Obama went along with the Saudi war in Yemen to placate the Saudis, which was something Obama said was because they were so pissed about Iraq.
Yeah, the Scott's Houghton is right. So what they did was basically after the Bush administration, the Saudis Obama basically wanted to repair the relationship with Saudi Arabia, but in doing so, he basically negated Israel. And so Israel at that time was still pushing for Iran hard. And I think you remember when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went with these big trash cards and showed that Iran was basically building a bomb and using these cartoon cutouts at the United Nations. That's their evidence. So you go. That's just as bad as when
looked like a Garfield cartoon out of the New York Times.
It's just like who's making these things? And he's begging the United Nations Security Council to go to war, and he lobbied hard with the Obama administration. And one good saving grace about the Obama administration was that he said that he would never invade Iran because he didn't want to make the mistakes of Bush and create an Iraq 2.0 of sorts. Right. Even though he invaded Libya and Syria, which
Iran would be a much worse than Iraq.
Oh, it would be a disaster.
It would be just total nightmare.
Yeah. And that army, the Persians, they are such a strong army. And they got a navy too.
Yeah.
So and
then you think about the terrain and the size of the country. Yeah. It's just it'd be like
it's not feasible.
Yeah, it would be like declaring war on Texas. Like you would just have so much trouble. You wouldn't know what you were getting into.
Right.
So
and plus, at the time, still they still had strong links with Bashar al-Assad in Syria and King Abdullah of Jordan, and with the connection to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So what they had to do was create war within these countries to break that direct link from Iran to Lebanon. And they, right now they're broken. Yeah. The only country that's not broken totally is Syria, but they're like 75% destroyed. But that's the one coup that was unsuccessful. But, the successful coup is Gaddafi in Libya. So that's the problem that the United States faces, is whether they are pressured to enter and to engage war with Iran. Now, the Pentagon, of course, the Pentagon has to go along with this. They're not just going to listen to Israel. So you got to have the top generals basically saying, what's the 10-year outlook on this? Because it's going to take a long time. Well, it's not going to be like Iraq.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the generals are not on board with a war with Iran.
Right.
They're like, we don't want anything to do with that.
Because I've asked Scott Horton this in a live discussion that he had, I think, with Reed Coverdale about 2 years ago, when one of my questions was, what's the more feasible war of the future? Is it North Korea, China, or Iran? And I told him I think it's Iran, and he said neither. He said Iran is the last, because he thinks that it's first of all, it's geographically not possible, and two, that the top generals in the Pentagon will not agree to this.
Yeah, and they won't agree to China either.
No way. Yeah.
If America is definitely invading one of those three, it's North Korea.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll play the contradictor to Scott Horton. I still think Iran's going to be the country that the United States invades because they're non-nuclear.
I don't think they will.
You don't think so?
No, because they're part of BRICS, and that's a big deal.
I didn't even take that into consideration. Good point. I'll still go on the limb and say, yeah, we'll have someone like DeSantis in the presidency, and he's AIPAC backed, so we'll see.
I mean, and that's part of the reason U.S. won't go directly to war with Russia, is because of the BRICS agreement. Just the other day, 12 other countries have applied to be part of BRICS.
BRICS, right? Yeah, there's a big issue recently.
Yeah. So and they're coming up with their own, basically their own trade routes and their own currencies, and they're doing away with the petrodollar whether we like it or not. It's kind of like,
Right.
oh fuck, what do we do? And it's really, but it's really interesting about the whole BRICS situation is if you're from South Africa, right? If you're Afrikaner or Boer from South Africa, you can go to England like basically anytime you want, because they consider you basically part of their colonies still.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
Right.
that's where, because my wife's from South Africa, her mom lives in England. And
Oh, really? Is that right?
yeah, yeah. And her sister lives in New Zealand. So it's very easy for South Africans to travel amongst these Western nations because of the colonialization that took place in South Africa. So it's really odd that they are in alignment with BRICS, but the reason they are is because China does all of their infrastructure. All of their infrastructure done in South Africa is done through China.
Is that right? Oh.
Yeah. So
no, I had no idea about that.
Oh yeah, China's like really, really active in Africa, while America is at war with Somalia and Ethiopia and all these fucking third world African countries. China's over there building up their infrastructure. So they all like China. They all love China to death.
Oh, is that right? I'm still new to this, learning about this. So,
but it has nothing to do with Saudi Arabia or 9/11. So we're kind of off on a rant.
Get off track.
That part of the world is so crazy, though.
Oh, it's so complicated. But
once you start talking about it and you start trying to figure out allies and all, you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
here.
Like, that's a problem, Tommy. I noticed too. When I talk about 9/11, people just see how expansive it is. They just throw their hands up. Oh, I'll forget about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like when we start talking about Saudi Arabia, I'm like, I don't even know what to ask. I don't know where to go from here.
Oh, sure.
Because it's like, what evidence do we have? There's plenty of speculation. We have the 28 pages, which you ran through, earlier. And it's like, all right, so let me ask this.
Sure.
So there are these lawsuits that were filed against bin Salman by Ajabri. I want to say the guy's name is Ajabri. He was is a counterterrorism expert who's from Saudi Arabia, but he worked hand in hand with U.S. intelligence. And the U.S., this is what I was talking to you before we went live. The U.S. has said that they were thinking about intervening into these lawsuits in Saudi Arabia because it would be bad for our national security, and that Ajabri would be opening up, like basically revealing some of the United States national security while pursuing these lawsuits against bin Salman. Do you know anything about this stuff?
I think you're talking about I want to say it's
I was just looking at
Omar Al-Jabri.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that his name?
Yeah. Am I just saying it wrong?
Probably. No. You got it right. It took me a little bit to remember the story about Al-Jabri. For those who don't know, Omar Al-Jabri served under the Saudi Minister of Interior under the now deposed Mohammed bin Nayef, who is supposedly, as I said before, the one time going to be the king of Saudi Arabia, who was deposed by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And what happened was that Jabri, who is considered a highly valued partner in the fight against Al-Qaeda, he actually went to try to work with the United States to give detailed information about Saudi family connections to Al Qaeda, and these were the sympathizers I was talking about earlier. Um, Now, Al Jabi was serving also as the CIA's Middle East division, and found him to be rather a remarkable public servant who is dedicated to destroying extremism and saving grace within the Saudi kingdom. Because we do have a lot of people in the kingdom that are not, that want to destroy the like the fanatics within the family.
The radicalism, yeah.
Yeah, the radicalists, the lobbyists.
Right.
And they want to get rid of this because it's not good for public affairs. Remember, a lot of these people in the kingdom, they basically have connections to these countries that without them, Saudi Arabia has nothing. I mean, even during trade, without oil, what do they have? Dates, figs. I mean, they're not a very major player in trade. And so without oil,
turmeric.
Yeah, I mean, something that's not going to, right. I mean,
I'm just being a smart ass.
No. It's funny because it's true, because without oil, that country, no one's going to do any type of trade with that country at all. There's nothing in common. But because they have vast oil reserves, you have a lot.
Well, that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason they're trying to control Yemen, is so they have that port, so they have that waterway.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's a good point that you raised too. But Jabi also had a lawsuit in which he accused Mohammed bin Salman in dispatching hit teams to go after him in Canada. And so I don't know where he is, Jabi. So I can't. Is he in the United States or
no? I don't think he's in the United States right now. Not anything I've read has put him in the U.S. He might be. He very well. He could be. And we just don't know about it.
Right, sure.
But
I want to say he has a daughter that is either in detention or under house arrest by the Saudi government. And he went to 60 Minutes on this, and complained about how his family's being treated. But this is what I was talking about with the bin Salmans, is that they crush all dissidents, all types of criticisms. And not just on the physical nature, but also on the technical issue. Excuse me. So they have an advisory committee that monitors like Twitter and Facebook, any type of criticisms from any Saudi citizens, especially within the kingdom. They're arrested, immediately arrested, detained. Some of them are tortured, and these are educators. Some of them are teachers, scientists. The Enlightenment group, these people that basically are speaking out against the brutal regime of bin Salman. So
and let's just make this clear, their reach, when the reason that Khashoggi was a big deal was not only because he was a journalist. His uncle was a CIA agent or operative overseas. Yes. They worked very tight with CIA, and it was it was suspected for a long time that Jamal Khashoggi was also involved in CIA. And even after admitting to dismembering Khashoggi and carrying him out of the embassy in suitcases, nothing has been done to bin Salman, and nothing will be done. And he even turned it around on the US. And so the fight that you're witnessing between the Biden administration and the Saudi administration for the price of oil, bin Salman is controlling that situation despite the crimes that he's committed, in killing media personalities, his own citizens, any dissenter, including Jamal Khashoggi. So the power this guy has at his disposal is incredible.
I think it's downright scary. And you bring up the Khashoggi murder. Even that didn't stop the family from bargaining rather aggressively with the Biden administration. Now, remember, the Biden administration also, in return for the Khashoggi murder, and because they didn't adhere to bin Laden's wishes that they produce more oil in 2021, immediately afterwards, right? Like right on cue, a week later, they released, I think it was over 5,000 pages on an FBI investigation into Saudi financing for the attacks called Operation Encore. And I've done a couple of videos on this, even dedicated a podcast to my show about it. And I'm reading currently. I'm still not done yet. I'm halfway there. There's about 2,600 more pages to go, but there were some revelations, including what we all assumed was that now it's definitive that there were Saudi government agents inside California assisting the 9/11 hijackers. It's not speculation anymore. Now
Right.
it's fact. So we have that much going for us. But guess what, Tommy? Just like you said, hey, that's not stopping the Saudi kingdom from saying, screw you.
Yeah.
We'll just hold back the production of oil to the United States. Oh,
Or
don't do that.
no, don't worry. We'll sell it to Russia.
Yeah, we'll sell it to right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, depending on no matter, I don't even think it matters about what president is in office. Saudi Arabia doesn't care. What they do care about is controlling the United States to the extent they know that they have power. That if they go to Russia, they go to Great Britain and say, "Hey, we'll lower oil for a price per barrel for you." Well, guess what? Guess who's on the outs? The United States.
Right. So anyway,
yeah.
Al Jabri, where were we?
Yeah, so Al Jabri basically wants to bring forth the attention that there are people within the Saudi kingdom, bin Salman's faction, that still supports elements of Al Qaeda in the Middle East, past and present. And this is not just a bin Salman problem. This is a Saudi family line problem. Right. Is that we have too many sympathizers within the family. We don't know how many there are. And remember, like I said, it's approximately there are 5,000 or 7,000 people within this family line. But a lot of these family lines also are very rich. And so you have a lot of these people that are giving money to these extremists because they want to see the Wahhabi ideology permeate throughout Arabia and destroy all enemies relating to this line of ideology. And who's the biggest enemy to the Wahhabi ideology? Well, believe it or not, it's the Shia Muslims, not the Jews, not the Christians, not the atheists. It's Shia Muslims. And when you hear like famous terrorists like bin Laden or Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, Abu Musab al-Bakri, the leaders of Islamic State, they basically come out and say that the Shia are considered munafiq, and that's Arabic for fake Muslim or apostates. These are the people that need to be killed first, even before Jews, Yahud in Arabic, even before Christians, even before atheists. The Shia are considered the biggest traitors. And so when the Islamic State started killing Shia, slaughtering them, all the Yazidis, the Alawites in Syria and in Iraq. Well, guess what happened? Syria, Libya, the countries that we bombed, and with the help of the Russians, basically destroyed the Islamic State in Syria to the point where we basically, destroyed 90% of the group itself. And so guess who started attacking these Iranians and Russians in Syria? Israel and the United States. What the hell for? Yeah. Aren't we supposed to be fighting a war on terror? So Jabril is bringing all this to attention to the United States, which is met with, a 50-50 because they know that if they blow the whistle in Saudi Arabia, they are not going to be the benefactors of oil production. But they can't ignore the information that he has. And he says that he has a lot more at his disposal that he hasn't told anyone yet. And so I believe that this guy could be the key to showing just how corrupt not just the bin Salman family are, but the Wahhabi ideology that permeates within the family that they claim is reformed. And I'm not buying that for a second. They've been using that excuse.
So I don't personally think that the U.S. would let this guy speak, because then it would reveal how the U.S. has been playing both sides. We're against Al-Qaeda here. We're on Al-Qaeda's side in Yemen, sure. Kind of deal. I don't think the U.S. wants this guy to speak. And that's why you have the national, what is it? The NSC. What does that stand for?
National Security Council.
Thank you. That's why you have them coming out saying that they want to intervene because he could be releasing national security to the world, and revealing some of the ways that we are interacting there in the Middle East. And so it would look bad, and it would show how the US is playing both sides in different regions. Whereas in like, let's say Yemen or Syria, we're fighting on side of Al-Qaeda, while we're also fighting Al-Qaeda on just across the border of Syria and Iraq. I mean, it's like some of the weirdest shit that I've ever seen whenever you start breaking it down.
Yeah, and I also I would have to say that there is no secret that the United States plays both sides, but they want to like tone it down in the public view. So
they got to keep the ruse on, because they never admit it. It's like, you can go figure it out. You can go read the articles and find out, right? But they never come out and say, yeah, we're over here we're doing this with Al-Qaeda, over here we're doing this against Al-Qaeda. They never come out and say it. And so to have to address that would be, problematic on their part.
It would be. And this is the reason why we see this continued protection of whistleblowers from Saudi Arabia, because they know that this would provide a double-edged sword, so to speak, in that regards to, yes, we'll blow the corruption, whistle on corruption in the country, but also at the same time, this would actually hurt the United States because they're actually trying to pressure the Saudi kingdom to be less corrupt and come clean. Saudi Arabia at the same time also may have secrets about the United States that they don't want to release, because this would actually be a blow for both the United States and Saudi Arabia at the same time, maybe 9/11 related. But I would agree with you to an extent that this would actually do a bit of harm in the public image by having this guy basically come out and blow the whistle on whatever he has. But what he has is enough to show that, hey, listen, this is an ongoing problem, not a current problem, an ongoing problem that's generational with terrorism in the country itself, and how they create, these groups and, finance these groups as well at the same time, while trying to say that we're reforming and, we have nothing to do with these groups. No, that's not true. Any layman in this field would tell you that there is a direct line between the Salafist groups, Wahhabi groups, to the kingdom itself. And that's, the tenets basically come from the Wahhabi ideology, which is permeate and help to create and shape Saudi Arabia in general, in its totality. And so what will happen with Jabril? I think he'll just remain in obscurity, always having the Saudi kingdom could get him at any time, and that the Canadian or U.S. authorities could basically say, we'll just disappear for a night and, let Saudi GID come in and, basically kidnap you and bring you back rendition to the country, where they probably will kill you, just like they did with Khashoggi, or maybe send a hit team, to go into Canada or the United States and do a Khashoggi on him. Who's to say? But right now, we're still not over the Khashoggi murder, so it'll take some time. But yeah, I think I agree with you, Tommy. I don't think this guy basically is going to reveal anything, because to do so would need his total backing in the United States. I don't think he's got that.
Yeah, and here's the part of that article that I was reading that is I would say is the most important part, probably about 5 or 6 paragraphs, but they're short. A rare U.S. Justice Department filing in a Massachusetts court in April noted al-Jabri's intention to describe information concerning alleged national security activities. The U.S. government is considering whether and how to participate in this action, including if necessary and applicable, through an assertion of appropriate government privileges, the filing said without elaborating. In a second filing a month later, the Justice Department asked the court for more time as national security matters require delicate and complex judgments by senior officials. The filing said the government was prepared to provide further information to the court in secret. Legal experts have said Washington could invoke the state secrets privilege, which would allow it to resist a court-ordered disclosure of information deemed harmful to U.S. national security. The CIA declined to comment to AFP. The Justice Department, which experts say only rarely intervenes in civil lawsuits, did not respond to a request for comment. So they're looking to intervene in the lawsuits, but they're trying to figure out the proper ways to intervene without revealing national security in the process, because they're worried about his testimony revealing national security.
Yeah,
it seems like they're in a conundrum here.
Yeah, quite. It goes back to our point that we raised about, if they let him talk, this would actually compromise the United States and Saudi Arabia, or just Saudi Arabia, or just the United States. But neither way, could this guy basically reveal what he has? And if he has what he says he has, that we have Saudi kingdom, major proponents in the kingdom that are sympathizing with these these Al Qaeda affiliates and Al Qaeda people in the Middle East. Well, then basically this will blow the roof on 9/11 and a lot of other things, which could compromise also the United States as well, if that information does exist. And also, would basically Saudi Arabia would do no business with the United States, and they can't afford that. My God, just the oil lost revenue alone. Even though we don't need the United States, Saudi Arabia. We got oil reserves here in the States, but it would cost. There's a lot more benefit for regulating the oil market in Saudi Arabia, because we can basically become the world power that we are, and not Soviet Russia or Great Britain. Which is basically what Saudi Arabia is thinking about changing the power, so to speak, over to. And King Salman basically met with, the Prime Minister of Great Britain about, producing more oil even for Russia too. So who knows what the future holds? But yeah, I'm with you there. This guy doesn't talk at all.
Yeah,
too much at stake.
Yeah, I think the story just kind of disappears. I don't.
Yeah.
More than likely, he winds up dead, and we never hear anything about it. For all we know, he's already dead.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, he's of course he's hidden away, but like I said, I think there's still too much attention light on Jamal Khashoggi. But at the same time, when that dissipates,
I just don't think people care that much.
Really? Is that?
Yeah, I just don't. I go through my daily life and I don't hear anybody talking about any of this stuff.
Really?
Yeah. We're weirdos, man. We're the strange ones.
We are strange.
People don't talk about this stuff. We're the only ones who talk about this stuff.
Well, you know what? That's a good point. I agree with you.
People are worried People are worried about inflation. They don't have time to worry about what the hell's going on in spycraft in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. They don't care.
Yeah, right, for sure.
Yeah. They're trying to feed their kids.
Right. But like I said, if this guy has what he says he has, this would be the news would. You still have independent media. Not everybody's bought off.
No, there are great journalists out there. There's like Greenwald, Taibbi, they're both good. Right. Mate's really good.
Right.
They're all leftist, but whatever. They're still good journalists,
Yeah, sure.
So there are good journalists out there that would be happy to talk about these things.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of the information leaking out in any way. I don't know if anybody's would risk the possibility of the information leaking out.
Yeah, there's so much at risk here.
Yeah.
There's so much at risk. So I would agree with you.
There's a lot of money and power at risk.
Yeah, there is too much.
People don't give up money and power easily.
Right. Exactly. And since we're dealing both with the Democrats and Republicans, there's no hiding either.
Well, you're not only dealing with that, you're dealing with other countries too.
Right, and dealing with other foreign, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Sure.
So there's no telling what dirt he has on. I mean, Saudi Arabia and the United States, that's just one. But he was working in counterterrorism he was the counterterrorism czar under Nayef, working hand in hand with the CIA.
Yeah, right.
Who knows what other country he was working in Turkey and Israel, and you don't know what's going to come out of his mouth.
Yeah,
you can't leave it to chance.
No, right. You'd be right about that.
And that's why I think he'll wind up dead without anybody ever hearing about it.
Without anyone hearing about it, I won't disagree that it's beneficial to kill him, because this way you earn, he's silent. But would nobody know about it unless, like I said, whoever's protecting him suddenly disappears and walks away, and the press asks, where is he? Oh, he's with somebody else. There would have to be a number of people involved to keep that image alive, that he's alive somewhere and being hidden away.
No, they would just make it look like he hung himself.
Well, that could be too. Yeah, sure. Suicide. Yeah. I mean, isn't that what they?
Yeah.
Isn't that what I think they did with Epstein?
Yeah, they hang him and shotgun blast to the chest.
He couldn't live on. Yeah.
Couldn't live with all these secrets, all the stress that was killing him.
Exactly. It was weighing on him.
Right. Yeah. What was the journalist out of California? The Iran Contra.
Gary Webb.
Gary Webb.
Although I don't discount that he killed himself.
I don't discount that he killed himself, but I don't discount the fact that they drove him to kill himself.
Yeah, they drove him. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
That they did that. They drove him to kill himself.
Yeah. So I mean, there's plenty of there are plenty of people that disappear from that line of work that we never hear about. And
that's what Saudi Arabia is good at. Disappearing people.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't think the U.S. is so innocent.
They make there's a history of it. I mean, who's the biggest killer of human beings in the world?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Sure.
So, all right. Well, let's close this one up. What's your final comments on Saudi Arabia's ties to 9/11 here?
Well, it's pretty much a lot of my work in details around Saudi Arabia, because, people say, well, why don't you talk about Israel? And one thing I say is this: it's fine to speculate, but I don't like using speculation because, I like to deal with information first, information that generally goes ignored for the more sexier fringe conspiracy material. And at the same time, I only use speculation when it's absolutely necessary, that in order to make a point. But there is a lot of evidence to show that there is Saudi complicity with 9/11 attacks. And I've always said, once you open the door to Saudi Arabia, that's how you can get to Israel at the same time. Now, remember, during pre-9/11, in the years 99 and 2000, you had two foreign governments that were working inside the United States, acting as spies to these groups like Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and other terrorist networks. And this came throughout in the Gerald Shea memo, which was an internal memo written by a former attorney out of California in San Isabel County, who basically did an independent investigation into these two foreign governments that were involved with the monitoring of a number of the people that were involved with 9/11. And what he found was there was a high number of people within Israel, the United States, and Saudi Arabia that were monitoring members of the 9/11 operators and their affiliates, Al-Qaeda affiliates. Saudi Arabia left behind many a footmark, and that's because they left behind a lot of money trails. And because of these money trails that the FBI investigated through Pent Bomb and later on Operation Encore we saw some connections not only between Al Qaeda, but with the Saudi government as well. Now, with Israel, they don't have any connections with with Arabic terrorism. Now, they may play as Arab terrorists. Some of them do go to a Arabic speaking language course. And so they go through this very covert, I forgot the name of that group, Israeli covert group, where they're dressed and they speak like Arabs. And Mr. Arvim, that's right, the Mr. Arvim, more covert than the Mossad, more covert than the Shin Bet, more covert than any other group. These are a group of people who basically train to speak the Arabic language, to live amongst Arabs and look like them in neighborhoods that are affiliated with Hamas and in Palestine. And they're basically, Israelis that go through this 1 to 2 month course that mimic Arabic culture. And so could that have been the case in some of these terrorist networks and training camps where these Israeli operatives that were, collecting information about, hey, what are they talking about? That very well, I think, is the case. And could that have happened inside the United States? That very well could have been the case. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but that's reasonable speculation. But that's the best we got. Because, like I said, with Saudi Arabia, at least you have a link between the country and the religion and the Wahhabi ideology and the terrorists itself. Israel, there is no such link. And so they're much more covert in terms of espionage and the dark arts, unlike Saudi Arabia, even though the GID is considered one of the more oldest and one of the best intelligence services in regards to the dark arts. But Israel is much more covert, much more secretive, and it's harder to get actual information regarding Israeli foreknowledge or complicity even. But foreknowledge, it's hard. Complicity is even harder. Yeah. So that's why there's a lot to connect Saudi Arabia to the United States. What doesn't help is that you have the United States government, the State Department, controlling the Department of Justice in withholding information to the public and even into the investigations, which we saw with Pentbomb and Operation Encore, regarding Saudi complicity in funding and providing logistical training and logistics to the Al-Qaeda operatives involved with 9/11. And if they're willing to do that with Saudi Arabia, what do you think they're going to do with Israel? Which they have a deeper connection to. So it's hard. And at the same time, Tommy, what doesn't help us is that there are so many people who propose these wild fanatical theories that absolve all these connections to Saudi Arabia and Israel. So on the one hand, we have a cover-up from the federal government, and at the other hand, we have a cover-up of these fringe conspiracies that absolve, the connections of Saudi Arabia and Israel to begin with. So there's a strong connection, and I wish more people would be involved with this investigation into Saudi Arabia. There's very few people that do report on it. You're one of them, and I tip my hat to you, Tommy, in doing so, regarding Saudi Arabia and the complicity involving Al-Qaeda operatives pre-9/11, and with the Operation Encore revelations that is generally ignored by the media, we now have evidence, prima facie evidence of support, financial and logistical support from the Saudi government to the 9/11 hijackers, at least some of them.
Well, whenever you get done reading those 5,000 pages, we'll do an episode on just that, and we'll just jump into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can teach them to me because I'm not reading those. I'm reading other stuff.
I don't blame you. It's a lot. It's a lot to go.
No, it sounds like a lot. And I have more than 5,000 pages here to read of books I bought. So I'm not.
I can't imagine. Because I look at your bookcase, I'm like, there's no way he's going through the Encore files. No way.
Yeah, no, I've read most of those. Like those are done. It's the ones.
Yeah, but I believe you told me off camera once that you had a ton of books that you have read.
I have all sorts of books. And exactly. What happens is they all have like, I know like the general information that's in them. So I scan them to find what I'm looking for. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the whole thing one of these days. And so I got books here with like books I haven't read, but I've read parts and pieces because I knew what I was looking for specific information. And so they all have like bookmarks in them. Like I've been reading them. So I've started like, if you looked at my bookcase, it's like I've started like 20 books, but really that's not the case. I'm really reading right now. I'm reading one book. Well, two books. But so.
Right. For sure.
But one of them's only like 80 pages long. So.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
Not bad.
No, it's easy.
Yeah.
If I wouldn't have been reading the second book, I would have already been done with this other one. So, but one of them's more for research for some podcast ideas I have going forward, and then the other one is something I'm working on reading through to do a full podcast with somebody on the book itself. So.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So that that's basically, and there's, that's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to read about Saudi Arabia and their connections to 9/11 attacks and how they're allowed to get away with it. And it's hard to cover up that big, but it's still ongoing. I mean, no matter who the president is, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, Bush, Obama, they'll protect their interests before they uncover any corruption or investigate honestly a crime such as egregious as 9/11. And just goes to show you that, we have a problem with corruption in this country. Right.
Yeah, we do. And we're on the verge of countries like Saudi Arabia that the U.S. has become dependent on for their for different products, jumping in bed with bricks and causing us lots of problems. And which is why the Biden administration went and started begging Venezuela to start selling oil to the U.S. It's like, oh, now you're on Venezuela's side.
Right. Yeah, now. Right.
Because they have something you need, because you're not willing. I mean, and the willingness to drill for oil here in the U.S., that's a completely different subject. I could go hours on that. I have all kinds of ideas based upon historical books I'm reading and stuff like that. I have all kinds of ideas about why that's going on, but that'll definitely be a different episode I'll be doing on that.
Sure.
But all right, next episode we're recording is on the NSA, the one you've been waiting on. This is the one you've been wanting to get to. And I keep saying, wait, we'll get to it. Hold on.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. It's the most obscure one and the most important.
Yeah, I believe you.
Yeah.
So, we're going to do the NSA next week. And then we're going to have to figure out where we're going to go from there, because there's still a bunch more information out there. So we'll just have to figure out the titles.
Yeah, for sure. So, and thanks for having me on again, Tom. Man,
it's always a blast. I love talking to you, Adam. You're a highlight, man. You're like a highlight. You're like everybody that's listened to these episodes keeps messaging me and going, geez, these are so good. And I'm like, yeah, man, Adam's like not well known, but he's like the Scott Horton of 9/11.
Heaps of praise right there. So,
it's like Scott Horton is an encyclopedia of foreign policy and Adam is an encyclopedia of 9/11. Like, it's just like some of the stuff you're saying, I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go look this up when we're done.
But thanks for the praise, man. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. It's a blast. Appreciate you being on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone, they demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Of those who are to blame, and we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.